Hi folks, I want to help you understand why this source is actually a primary source and not a secondary source. So I want us to go back to the video that you watched from the first week of class. And this is the script. Remember, there's a YouTube video of it that you could watch, but also there's a script of it. So I'm just going to look at the script so we don't have to start up the video. Remember that a primary source is a source in history created during the time that you're studying. So if we're studying the time of the slave trade, this source would need to be created during or even just right after the time of the slave trade, which it was. So if we look at the bottom of this source here, let me zoom in for you a little bit, you have the date right here when it was created. I think some people may be confused by this date. This is just the date that it was published. This is the date that it's created. If you ever see two dates, the first date is usually when it was created, and then this is just when it was made public years ago or years later in a book. So always go with the first date. That's the date that it was actually created. Another way that you could know that this was created during this time period and not this one, so created in the 1780s during the time of the slave trade, is just look up the author real quick. And so I just Googled the author here, and you'll see right away that this person was living during this time frame, so he could not possibly have been creating a document in 1999. So that's the easiest and simplest way to know that this is a primary source. It was created during the time that we are studying. But I want to go on just a little further and tell you a few more reasons why you know it is not a secondary source. The author is describing firsthand the slave trade as he's seeing it. So he's giving you lots of details about what it was like based on what he saw. He's telling you about the exact people who were there and what it looked like. He says closeness and stench. He even tells you what the smell was like. So he's giving you firsthand details about what it was like to actually be in this place. If this were a secondary source, the author would be using other primary sources like this one, to analyze and describe what something in the past was like. So in order for this to be a secondary source, let's go back and remind ourselves what a secondary source looks like. It's to interpret something that happened in the past, and you have to use a bunch of primary sources in order to create a secondary source. So someone creating a secondary source, for example, a person who's writing a book about slavery, would have to use primary sources like this one and lots of others. And the way you would be able to tell if they were using a bunch of primary sources is by looking for footnotes. You would look and see, is there anywhere down here where he tells me that he read a bunch of other primary sources and analyzed them and put them all together? And that's another good clue that something is a secondary source. Let's look down here, for example. Back in the video, it reminded you that books are often or almost always secondary sources, and they're usually written several years later by people who did not witness them directly. Remember, this author here, who lived during the time period that the primary source was written, definitely witnessed these events directly and is telling you what it looked like and smelled like and felt like and what the emotions were like in this actual place and time. So if you wrote that this was a primary source, that is correct. If you said it was a secondary source, that is incorrect. I'm going to give everyone a quick email about how I'm scoring these for this week, so be on the lookout for that as well. And you'll need to come back to this video for upcoming assignments, so make sure you save it somewhere you can see it. Thanks, you guys have a great weekend.